"I will never give you my heart," said the Marquis, but he collapsed when he saw her wed another man. The lanterns were already lit when Elisa stepped into the garden, their soft halos strung like low moons along the tiled loggia. Music drifted from the far end, two guitars in patient conversation, a rhythm meant to quiet nerves, not stir them. The air was warm and sweet. Orange trees lifted their blossoms over the whitewashed walls, scenting the evening like a promise she didn't trust. She stood where she had been arranged to stand, near the marble fountain with its pair of stone dolphins, where paths converged and conversation turned. A maid had pinned her mantilla with the same care given the silver on the sideboard. Her gown was modest, the pale blue of a morning sky. In her hand, the ivory fan felt cool, the carved orange blossoms kissing her palm with each flex of her fingers. Faces gathered and sifted, an eddy that circled without breaking. Questions were not asked. They were implied and answered with a nod or a lift of a brow. Seville's finest had a way of seeing without appearing to look. They glanced over the fountain's ripple, past the lemon-shaped lanterns, to the girl at the center of tonight's arrangement, the artisan's daughter, the household's answer to rumor. Elisa made herself still. Stillness was her one defense. If she did not stir, they could not see the trembling in her bones. Her father's voice lived under her breath. "Steady your hands, child. Let the tool do the work." She let the fan guide the rhythm of her breath. Open, count, close. She would not grip it like a weapon. She would not. The dowager marchioness crossed the gravel with a rustle that suggested silk had its own will. People made way without thinking. Her gaze skimmed over Elisa's face, as if checking for something left out of place. A nod, a smile not meant to warm, and the dowager moved on to adjust the evening as one adjusts the hands of a clock. There was comfort for others in that, Elisa thought, not for her. A man drew up beside her with a bow that was not too elaborate. Don Rafael de Cardenas. His presence soothed the surface of the water. His jacket was dark, his expression clearer than most. "You have chosen the right corner," he said. "From here the singers sound better than they are." She found the edge of a smile. "Then I am well placed." "Do you like music, Doña Elisa?" "I like the way it stops people from pretending." He followed her glance. The circle around them narrowed by a finger's breadth. In the distance, a woman laughed at a pitch that signaled rival watchers. Someone's fan clicked once, twice, like a cricket under hedges. Raphael's mouth softened. "It is nearly impossible to pretend while the guitars play," he said. "One must breathe. Breathing betrays everyone." "Does it betray you?" "It keeps me honest, and that is hard enough." Their exchange did not change the shape of the evening, but it changed the temperature of the air around her. Relief lived in courtesy when courtesy was sincere. She held it like a cool, pressed cloth. She would return it later if she could. They were interrupted before they could take another breath. A woman whose name everyone knew without saying drifted close on the tide of a whisper. Her colors were exquisite. Her voice, soft as muslin, edged like a paper cut, bloomed into the silence. "How pretty she looks," the woman observed to no one. "It is generous of the house to give shelter where the streets give only talk." Elisa felt each word placed on her shoulders, as if weighing cloth. Raphael took the weight off by moving half a step closer, as if nothing at all had happened. "The shelter is finer for having her in it," he said. "I am certain the house knows it." The woman offered a little shrug, all lace and innocence. "We are only grateful," she said. Elisa lifted her fan to her cheek and felt its smooth cool. The carving under her thumb, the small cluster of orange blossoms, had been done by a careful hand. A truthful hand. She concentrated on that. She didn't see him until the air tightened. Conversation slowed, and then found a new rhythm. A path opened that she had not consented to open, and Alejandro, Marquis de Alboran, came into view across the fountain. Alejandro's entrance never announced itself. It occurred. He wore black with a whisper of sheen, and the white at his throat was as severe as a prayer without ornament. His hair was cut without fashion's frills, his expression composed to the point of stillness. He did not have to look at people to make them feel seen. They felt weighed and found within his gravity. He had been avoiding this moment for months. He had postponed it with travel, with business, with 100 errands that suddenly could not wait. But rumor worked like water, finding every seam. Tonight, the dowager had gathered all the seams in one place. He came because duty required it. He told himself that was the line, and he would keep it. He saw the girl, Elisa, before he saw the circle. She was not dazzling. She did not need to be. Her poise drew the light toward her. He saw the movement of her breath at her throat. He saw the fan in her hand, and the way her fingers adjusted along its guard with the deliberate care of someone who had been taught to handle an instrument. Other details rose and fell. The scrolled iron of the loggia rail, the way lanterns painted warm halos on the gravel, the water's soft spill at the fountain. He registered Raphael at her side, precisely where he would be most useful. A brief flare of something he refused to name crossed his chest and was put out immediately. The dowager caught his eye and directed him into position with the slightest tilt of her head. He stepped forward. The circle widened to admit him and closed behind. "Señor Marquis," the woman with the muslin voice breathed. "What relief you must feel, to at last put this affair to rest." "Relief is for men who have the luxury of disorder," he said. "Tonight we have order." The woman made herself pleased with that, because being pleased cost nothing. She turned toward Elisa and arranged surprise over approval. The others did the same, a choreography that had been practiced in other rooms with other people and would be practiced again. Alejandro looked at the girl fully. Her eyes were not lowered in the manner he expected. They were steady and unguarded. He had come prepared for pleading or calculation, or the soft pliancy of someone hunting for security. He found none of that. He found a kind of quiet steel that made him revise every prepared sentence. "Doña Elisa," he said, bending a fraction, "our household is honored by your presence under our roof." She dipped her head with a grace she must have taught herself. "Your household has many rooms," she said. "I am grateful for the corner I've been given." It was modest. It was also not modest. Something in his chest adjusted, as if a coat had pulled too tight. He kept his voice level. "We are practical people," he said. "Practical houses are often merciless houses. I would not have ours be so." "Practicality looks merciful," she replied, "when it is exercised upon someone else." The woman in muslin decided this had gone far enough. "How we admire clarity," she inserted. "It spares us confusion." "Clarity spares many things," Alejandro said. "It seldom spares comfort." Raphael's mouth turned, the ghost of a smile. He inclined his head, but said nothing. The guitars shifted into a new key. A little wind moved the lanterns and brought in a fresh breath of azahar from beyond the wall. It was the kind of moment that could tip toward solace or toward cruelty with a sentence. The dowager chose the path. She did not speak yet. She was waiting for the shape of the night to confirm itself. Her son stood at the center like the figure on a clock face. Her hand hovered over the mechanism. Alejandro felt the weight of her expectation. He could name it. End this. Make it sound like mercy. Their position was a house on stilts. Another gust and it would groan. He owed the house his spine. He had thought for weeks what he would say, and every version had failed him at the last step. He had one sentence left. He would say it. He would bear it. He turned to Elisa, not because he intended to wound her, but because interruption would bleed out the room more cruelly. If it had to be said, it should be said cleanly. He leaned on the table of what men call honor and did not examine whether it held. "Doña Elisa," he said, and his voice was steady because he made it steady. "I will never give you my heart." The line landed without flourish and without echo. Some sentences echo because they want to be believed. Others are absorbed by the air because they are too heavy to bounce. This sentence sank. It sank through the gravel. It sank through the stone. It sank through her. Elisa did not move. The fan in her hand absorbed the convulsion. Her knuckles whitened, then returned to color. She lifted the fan quickly and at once lost it. The guard slipped, her thumb misjudged, and the ivory fell away in a light arc that would have been comic in another life. Alejandro reacted before he thought. His hand shot out. The fan struck his palm and stopped. His fingers closed over the carved blossoms, the cool of ivory shocking against warm skin. Something in him recorded the exact texture, the way the carving grazed his lifeline. He offered it back. Elisa reached. Their hands met in the space other people pretended not to see. The contact was brief, a breath caught and contained, but in that breath, all the lines he had drawn flickered. They did not disappear. They flickered. "Forgive me," she said. "There is nothing to forgive." There is the sentence. He did not answer. He could not. He had completed his duty. The room would adjust. People would speak again. The dowager would bring conversation to a gentle fall. Order would return. It returned, but it returned altered. A hush changed from stunned to electric. The woman in muslin dropped her lashes and let the hush braid into rumor. Two men at the edge compared expressions. A young lady bit the corner of her lip with the ferocity of someone storing a story for later. The night's balance had shifted and would not shift back. There are sentences that, once spoken, leave a mark like a hot iron. Everyone smelled it. Raphael moved one step nearer. "Doña Elisa," he said, pitched for her alone. "If the air is too warm here, the garden beyond the loggia is cooler." She inhaled and found the air. "Thank you. I am well." He believed her because she made him. He did not move away because he refused to leave her unaccompanied in a ring of gazes that had sharpened to needles. He did not look at the Marquis. He did not need to. Alejandro looked past them toward the far pillars. An old pride stood up in him, the way an old horse stands at the smell of smoke. It had saved him before. It would not fail him now. If he kept his hands still, if he kept his mouth quiet, the night could be shepherded back into its pen. A servant in livery stepped too close to the fountain and splashed water on the gravel. Alejandro spoke his name and sent him to the kitchen with a correction that bit. The boy flushed, bowed too low, and retreated. The small cruelty tasted bitter even before it left his mouth. He despised himself for it instantly. He could not take it back without making it worse. He turned to leave the circle, but the dowager's presence caught him like a net. She was at his shoulder, smiling for the room, her fan moving in a pattern that only family could decode. Not yet. Not finished. "My friends," she said, and the nearby voices fell. "We will give thanks for the frankness we have heard. Frankness is a scarce courtesy." The muslin woman smiled in a way that agreed and disagreed at once. "It is indeed," she murmured, and the circle murmured with her. Elisa stood with her head high because lowering it would break her neck. She could feel the fountain at her back, the faint spray kissing her shoulder, as if to remind her that the world contained water and not only heat. The fan lay once more against her palm. As she closed it, a tiny sound slipped, a click at the guard, hardly a noise at all. No one heard it, but her. It steadied her more than any blessing could have done. She saw him look at her again. She saw the regret that he would die rather than admit. It did not soften her. It did not harden her. It arranged her. Raphael drew her safely into the circle of a neutral conversation offered by a cousin who had nothing to say and was doing his best to say it. The cousin discussed oranges as if they were a theological matter. The relief was absurd and sufficient. Elisa nodded when it was required. She breathed when it was required. The night continued. The dowager moved among her guests with an ease that had been taught to her as a girl when men still wore powdered hair. She inquired after a grandmother. She praised a lace-maker. She laughed, and her laugh ensured other people felt comfortable. It was a work of art, It was also a calculation. She gathered 2 matrons who knew how to repeat a story without changing it. She gathered a young man who liked to run errands. She gathered the woman in muslin because the woman in muslin could kill a rumor with a sigh. The dowager asked 3 questions, none of which were truly questions. The answers would not change the course she had set before the evening began. From the corner of her eye, she watched her son. The line of his shoulder did not bend. Good. She watched the artisan's daughter. The girl did not flutter. Interesting. She recalibrated without a blink. "Forgive me," Raphael said to Elisa in the tiniest break in talk. "Sometimes I wish these lanterns would all go out at once." And then? Then we would find out who knows how to breathe in the dark. She almost laughed. Almost. It would have been a relief, and she did not trust relief yet. Alejandro felt the eyes upon him change. They had watched a spectacle. Now they watched for instruction. A house takes its cue from its master, even if the cue is silence. He took a breath and gave the only cue he could. He went still. He set his glass on the table and stepped beside the dowager as if to admire the fountain. He spoke to a guest about irrigation of citrus, and he did it well, and those who wanted to be kind to him took his lead and spoke of the earth instead of the heart. The woman in muslin listened to the polite conversation for a time, and then released a murmur that slid through the hedges and along the path to the loggia, where a second circle picked it up and carried it to the gate. "The house has compassion," the murmur said, "and compassion has limits." It was a soft sentence. It traveled faster than a shout. The guitars paused. A new voice took up a sevillana with a teasing lilt that made the young men smile, and the old ones remember other patios. It was nearly possible to imagine the evening had turned toward pleasantry. Nearly. The heat at the back of Elisa's neck refuted the illusion. She drifted a small pace to cool herself and came to the edge of the fountain where the spray was faintest. A child's toy boat, forgotten by some daytime visitor, bobbed in a circle near the stone dolphin. She watched it go around and around, helpless to change its course unless someone put a hand in and stopped it. The thought irritated her more than it should have. She craved a hand. She also feared it. Alejandro saw her look at the little boat. He suffered the flash of a vision that struck him as indecent because he did not indulge visions. His hand reaching into water in front of everyone to change a toy's path. The ridiculous tenderness of the image infuriated him. He was a man who signed deeds and wrote letters to ministers and was obeyed. He could not be a man who wanted to touch water to move a toy. He ground the feeling under his heel and spoke instead to a gentleman about a horse. The dowager decided the night had reached its critical mass. Waiting would not improve it. The longer she permitted silence to pool around this matter, the more likely it would breed algae. Good houses do not permit algae. She returned to the circle around the fountain and established a place for herself at the front of it with the simple rightness of a woman who has never been refused a place in her life. "My friends," she said, and again the voices fell as if tethered to her fan. "We have had a great favor tonight." The compliment came wrapped around a demand. People arranged their mouths to be pleased before they knew at what. "The favor," she continued, "of knowing where we all stand. This is a blessing. The city is careful with such blessings. It will not receive them unless they are pressed into its hand." No one asked what that meant. They did not need to. She turned her face toward Elisa with the kind of smile that makes other women revise their posture. "You have conducted yourself admirably, child," she said. "In the morning you will be spoken of with respect, for I will see to it." Elisa inclined her head, while her pulse laid a path of heat across her skin. "Respect," the dowager said, turning now to the circle, "is a public act. It must be given a form. We will, therefore, give it a form. We will tell the city what to think by telling it what we intend." Alejandro felt heaviness move through his limbs, recognition and resistance in one. He had known the mechanism would be employed. He had resisted it longer than was courteous. He opened his mouth, closed it, and chose not to make an enemy of his own house in front of half the city. Raphael did not speak. He looked at Elisa with a question he would not ask in front of witnesses. The woman in muslin looked ecstatic at the prospect of something to repeat accurately. The lantern nearest the fountain flickered and steadied. The water gave a little laugh against the lip of the marble, as if even stone found drama entertaining in the right amount. Elisa lifted her fan and lowered it. The carved blossoms slid under her thumb, and the infinitesimal click at the guard sounded again, a private signal that made her spine straighten. The dowager's voice carried over the gravel, imperious and smooth at once. She did not consult. She did not seek assent. She offered an inevitability that would wash the patio and flow through the gate and down the street and into the cathedral district before the hour turned, because that is what inevitabilities did in Seville when a house like this one chose them. The banns shall be cried on Sunday, or you will leave this house before dawn. The word Sunday hung in the air like a bell that had not finished ringing. Lantern light trembled. Breath trembled with it. Elisa felt the echo roll through the circle, wash across the gravel, slip under her shoes. People spoke again, small words, unimportant words, the kind used to bridge the distance between shock and appetite. The guitars fumbled and then found their rhythm. The fountain went on being a fountain, indifferent and faithful. She lowered her fan once and lifted it again to occupy her hand. The carved orange blossoms touched the pads of her fingers. The tiny catch ticked as if the fan had a heart of its own. She did not look at the dowager. She did not look at Alejandro. She did not look at the woman who fed Seville at her table of insinuations. She asked her feet to move, and discovered they would, if she asked kindly. Raphael moved with her, easy as a shadow that had chosen to be loyal. "A little water," he said, as if that were the only thing needed in the world. "Water," she echoed. It sounded like a blessing. They reached the edge of the fountain, and then, by unspoken permission, the edge of the crowd. The music drew attention away as they slipped into the shade of the loggia. Cool stone underfoot steadied her. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck the quarter. A maid with a tray hesitated, set it down too quickly, and fled like a sparrow from a hawk's sweep. Elisa could not blame her. The night had grown sharp. "Do you wish to sit?" Raphael asked. "I wish to be where no one thinks I am on display." "Then the library," he said. "It's the one room where men talk too low to be heard and pretend to read while counting their enemies. Do you count yours there?" "I have very few enemies," he said lightly. "I'm poor at the sport. I am tired of sports." "That is because you have been used for one," he said, and the gentleness in it helped more than any argument could have done. "Come." She looked back once and saw him, the Marquis, standing with his mother, his profile cut like a seal. The sight stung as hot wax stings when it hits the skin. She turned away before pride could make her foolish. The library breathed a different air. The candles were placed for usefulness rather than drama. The scent was beeswax and leather and paper warmed to a whisper by the heat of the day. A window stood open to the courtyard and let in the thinnest stripe of song with a stripe of night. Shelves rose with their ranks of law and history and theater and sermons. On a side table, sheets of music lay ready to be copied for the entertainment of the household, arias and seguidillas, the work set aside for someone nimble and invisible. "I can make myself useful," Elisa said, because usefulness felt like a shield. She set her fan beside the folio and took up a quill. The familiar act calmed the storm that had blown in behind her ribs. Raphael stood a distance away, as if she were an icon one did not approach without washing. "I will linger in the hall," he said. "I will frighten away anyone who comes to ask you to smile." She dipped her head in gratitude. He withdrew, and then did what he said he would do. Became a presence in a doorway, letting a handful of men exchange murmurs around him and using his watchfulness to close the room without appearing to close it. Elisa traced the curved notes across the page. Her father had taught her that accuracy was another name for dignity. Your lines should be steady, even if your heart is not. Her lines were steady. Her heart was not. A breath altered behind her. Not Raphael's. Not a stranger's. It had a weight she knew now by the change it made in the air. Alejandro had crossed the threshold without sound. A man mounting the scaffold he had himself ordered, choosing calm because that was the only choice left him that resembled kindness. He took in the room at a glance designed to appear casual. It wasn't. He saw her at the table copying music for people who would not notice it had been copied. He saw the fan resting like a sleeping thing by her hand. He saw the simple comb in her hair. He had never before looked long enough to see how a simple comb could be perfectly placed. Doña Elisa, he said, because form was the last refuge of men like him. Señor Marquis, she answered without turning. If she looked at him, her eyes might say what she had no right to say. Silence arrived like a third person. The clock across the hall exhaled the seconds. A page took ink. I should not have used the garden, he began. Then he discarded the sentence on the table like a letter that had already been answered. No, I should not have said it at all. Then why did you? She asked, still copying. Because it was true. She placed one more note with care. Then mercy would have been silence. Mercy, in my house, often looks like a decision no one wants to hear. Mercy for whom? She asked. Her hand swallowed a tremor and gave the page a clean line. He moved closer, not so near that a man in the hall would find reason to clear his throat, not so far that the space between them felt safe. For everyone, he said. For you most of all. She laid down the quill. You do not know me. No, he said. I do not. I know rooms. I know how they break people. I know how quickly pity becomes a trap. She reached for clean paper. Her focus was a mask, her dignity, a blade. You speak as if affection were the trap. In my experience, he said, and he did not finish because truth made him unspeakable for a breath. In my experience, he tried again, affection is a tool. It has a price I do not pay well. She looked up at him now, and the look was the kind that could unmake a man's rules. Then you should not buy it, she said. But you need not insult it in the market. A candle at the far end snapped and steadied. He wanted to step forward, to pick up the pen she had laid down, to place it where it would not roll, to do anything that resembled care without being named as care. He did not move. He tightened his hand behind his back until the hunger to reach became pain. She turned a leaf, and the edge caught her fingertip. It was no more than a kiss of paper, the smallest red bead gathering as if the page had stung her for insolence. He took one step. It was one step too far, and exactly the right one. Allow me, he said, and his voice was too low and too quick. He reached for the linen that lay coiled in a little tray, caught her hand on its way back, and lifted it into the light to see the hurt. Her hand fit in his palm like a fact he had been denying, warm, fine-boned, alive. The smallest wound. A drop of red defying composure. He wrapped it because that was permitted. His thumb brushed the center of her palm inadvertently and sent a current like lightning she did not expect to survive without a mark. It lasted a beat. It lasted a lifetime. He released her with a care that made the moment worse. Thank you, she said. The two words cost her nothing except everything. He straightened as if pulling himself back into armor. We will not permit your departure before dawn, he said. Not if there is any justice left in this house. Justice, she said softly, needs honesty for a bed. We will provide both. Then you must begin at the table, she said, and for a second he did not follow. With whom? He asked. With yourself. There was no reply that did not expose him. He stood with it. The only mercy he would permit himself was to lift the music and place it out of harm's way, his hand careful where hers had been. He left before the room made fools of them. Raphael was still in the doorway, speaking with two men who had the look of people searching for purchase on the side of a moving thing. He let the Marquis pass without comment. He stepped into the library after, his presence bringing air with it. "Will you walk?" he asked. "I will," she said. "Only a little." They went by way of the inner hall to the terrace that faced the orange trees. The night had thickened to its deepest warmth. The lanterns lifted small galaxies along the path. Far in the city, some other courtyard laughed. Here, the party breathed, as if it had been running. "You have courage," Raphael said, after they had gone 3 paces in quiet. "There are men who will boast of less." "My courage is utility," she said. "I learned it from hunger." "You learned it well." He offered his arm not as command, but as suggestion. She took it because she wanted to know whether there was a way to lean without promising herself a way. There was. The arm was a path, not a tether. Above them, a narrow balcony ran the length of the house. Footsteps crossed there, slow, measured. Elisa did not look up. Raphael glanced with the corner of his eye and saw the dark figure cut against the lighter wall. He did not name him. Naming would have given the moment away. "You have friends in that house," Raphael said. "I have corners," she answered. "They are not the same." He smiled, and the smile found the line between sadness and humor. "Perhaps we can turn a corner into a door." Doors require keys, and keys require the will to use them. You speak like a man with an idea. I speak like a man who hates injustice and favors small acts over grand speeches. What act? One that protects you. One that tells the city it cannot chew a woman and spit out the rind. A handkerchief, some small lace thing dropped by a lady in her wandering, fell from the balcony above and landed at Raphael's boot. He bent and lifted it with 2 fingers, amused and unamused. He offered it to Elisa with a theatrical flourish that mocked the notion of charm, and then tucked it into his pocket when she declined. Above, footsteps paused, and then moved on. A silhouette remained at the rail, a still line in a night of moving ones. "Come," Raphael said. "There is a colonnade near the chapel. No one ever goes there unless they are lost or trying not to be seen. It offers both comfort and mischief." "I should not want mischief," she said, but she smiled. Comfort would be welcome. The colonnade was almost dark, the candles there poorly tended. A candelabrum leaned too near a curtain, which had already felt the brush of heat and begun to sigh in protest. The wax had grown soft. One drop fell and struck the tile beside Elisa's shoe. Another gathered at the rim, swollen and aching to release. She crossed the distance in 3 steps, and steadying the stand with both hands, she pulled it away from the fabric. The bronze foot caught on the fringe of a rug and swayed. She held fast. The wick answered with a taller flame, then a shorter one, like a breath taken, and let go. "Careful," said a voice behind her that did not belong to Raphael. Alejandro's hand came up to meet the stand, palm open. His shoulder blocked the candle from her hair. The heat brushed his wrist. The scent of singed wick lifted, bitter and intimate. "I have it," she said, because she did. "You do," he agreed, and he did not move until she might not burn herself if she did. The angle brought him near enough that he could smell the starch of her sleeves and the cleaner note beneath, soap and orange blossom. He felt it like a second heat. Her cheek was a hand's breadth from his shoulder. If he lifted his arm an inch to secure the sconce, he would touch her. He did not lift his arm an inch. Raphael came to the threshold and stopped there. No man of sense enters a chapel in the middle of an earthquake. He watched. He kept silence the way a priest keeps bread, carefully and with intent. "Thank you," Elisa said, looking not at the man who held the stand with her, but at the flame she had prevented from making drama. Alejandro released the base, confirmed with a slight pressure that the weight was stable, and stepped back. He bowed a hair's width. It was not enough for courtesy. It was enough for truth. "Do not risk yourself for a curtain," he said. "I have been set on fire before," she said. "I prefer to choose when." It was the kind of line Raphael loved, because it could make a man change direction if he had the courage to hear it. This man did not change direction, but he flinched as if a muscle memory had been pressed. His mother's fan rattled a warning from the hall beyond, and the warning found its mark. The dowager's shadow touched the mouth of the colonnade with two matrons in tow. Her glance took in the stand, the nearness, the impropriety that was not impropriety, the witness at the threshold. She rearranged it all in the space of a breath. "We are not barn animals," she said to the matrons, in a tone that suggested she had been talking about silk the whole time. "We do not play with fire." Alejandro withdrew another pace and opened a space between himself and danger. "Of course," he said to air, to the flame. To the woman he could not afford to see again so near without losing something he had not meant to risk. Elisa found her fan where she had laid it on the narrow ledge. It felt cooler now from the stone. The minute click at the guard was a rhythm note against her thumb. She would not let her hand shake. She refused the kindness of her own body's weakness. "Come," the dowager said, breezing her small cortege onward. "We will take chocolate." She did not look back. She rarely needed to. Alejandro inclined his head to Raphael and to Elisa. He did not speak. He had learned again the trick of stillness. He left because if he remained, the night would acquire a new shape he did not recognize and could not lead. They watched him go. Raphael stepped into the colonnade and exhaled slowly. "You do not burn easily," he said. "I have scar tissue," she answered. "It resists." "Good." He looked at the droplet of wax that had cooled on the tile, a small white tear. "Some things are meant to harden. Others must be made to melt." Footsteps approached along the inner hall, a quiet, efficient rhythm. Not a guest's, a servant's. A young man in livery, the same perhaps who had suffered an unnecessary correction near the fountain, came with an air of being too brave for his clothes. "Forgive me," he said to Raphael first, because a man was easier to address, then to Elisa, because he had a mother. A note reached the antechamber. It was meant for the mistress of the house. It found two other hands first. It was read. It was then brought to me with a wink. "I thought you should see it." Raphael's jaw tightened. "From whom?" "From those who think mischief is sport," the servant said. "I do not know the name they used. I know the ink." "Let me," Raphael said, and he took the folded paper. He read it, and the lines around his mouth spoke before his words did. He held it toward Elisa. "I will not pass it into your hand unless you wish." "What does it say?" she asked. "That you set this trap," he said. "That you came with a plan to force the house to claim you. That the city has been waiting for tonight, and you did your part. That if you had any decency, you would take your decency somewhere else." She did not ask to see it. She did not need to. The words had been rehearsed for weeks by people who wished to be entertained. She stared at the note as if it were a small animal on a plate. Hunger could make a person eat anything. She had decided not to be hungry that way. The servant shifted, shame rising like heat from his collar. "I would not bring it," he said, "if I did not believe you deserve to know what is said in rooms that pretend to be clean." "You did right," Raphael told him. "Thank you." Alejandro, returning along the corridor with the small certainty that comes after denying yourself anything, saw the clustering near the colonnade. He did not intend to stop, then stopped because the servant's face declared something that would be uglier if left to fester. "What is this?" he asked, and his voice had the clipped edge of a man defeated by his own better nature. Raphael did not hand him the note. "A trick," he said. "A clumsy one." "I will see it," Alejandro said. Raphael hesitated a heartbeat too long. He saw the path in front of him divide. He was a man who took a harder road when the softer one disgusted him. He handed over the paper. Alejandro read it. His face did not change. That frightened Elisa more than anger would have. She watched the control seat itself again, as if settling at a fine table. He folded the paper twice, then once more, smaller, until it was neat as a sin made modest by shape. "This house will not be moved by anonymous courage," he said. "We do not take instruction from masks." Elisa found her voice, and it tasted of the copper at the tip of her tongue where the paper had nicked her. "Then say it's a lie." "It does not deserve the dignity of a denial," he replied. "It deserves the dignity of truth," she said. For a moment he could not assemble his arguments fast enough to outrun her sentence. He put them together anyway, careful and slow. "Truth is not served by answering every boy who throws stones at a window," he said. "We close the shutters." "And those inside suffocate," she said. The servant made himself small against the wall. Raphael did not pretend this could be smoothed. He looked at Alejandro a long second. "You do not believe it," he said. "No," Alejandro admitted. "I do not." "You do not deny it," Raphael said. "I will not give it life." Elisa felt the wound the way a tooth feels a crack when you drink cold water. It was not fatal. It hurt more because it refused to be dramatic. This was the new cruelty. Nothing sharp enough to kill. Everything sharp enough to bleed. Raphael folded the note once more in his palm and slipped it into his coat, as if to say he would handle it because someone had to. He held himself very still. "I am not a man for grand declarations," he said. "I do not throw my sword over the wall and demand a war. I prefer lighter tools. But there are nights when a small love of ease becomes an ugly form of cowardice." Alejandro watched him without nodding. "Then be brave," he said, and he believed he was granting permission for another man to make a mess he would later be asked to clean. Pride does this, calls messes by other names. Raphael turned back to Elisa. He had a proposal in his mouth. It was not ornamented. It was made of wood and iron. "This house has made a choice about you it cannot own," he said. "The city is ready to make another. Both are wrong. There is a straight road that goes between them and comes out in the light. It requires you to walk at my side for a time. I will not touch you except where law demands. I will not speak for you except where you ask me to. I will not barter you for favor. I will stand with you while the city learns a new habit." "What road?" she asked. Her breath went somewhere she could not reach. She felt it and made do with the air the night offered. "To the cathedral," he said. "To Father Thomas. To a legal mercy that belongs to the church and not to a house. It is a mechanism meant to protect the vulnerable when slander becomes a weapon. It is sober. It is swift when the cause is grave." Alejandro inhaled as if the word cathedral were a key turning in a lock behind his ribs. "You presume," he said softly. "I presume," Raphael answered, "that a woman deserves not to be ground beneath the gears of our vanity." Elisa's pulse measured out her answer in a pattern against her skin. Pride shook hard inside her. Hope pushed back. Fear stood like a watchman and raised questions that did not belong to this hour. The fan in her hand clicked once, as if to mark a minute in which a life might turn. "Say the word," Raphael murmured, steady as a vow. "And I will go to Father Thomas now." Elisa did not look at Raphael's hand. She looked toward the doorway where voices gathered like a tide, then back to the little triangle of shadow between them that held a future. Her throat felt like a fist. The fan clicked once, small and decisive. "Yes," she said, and her voice was softer than the word deserved, but it was whole. Raphael did not exhale until her yes landed. He bowed his head, not to her, but to what the word asked of him. "We will do this correctly," he said. "No corners cut. No secrets. We will be quick and obvious." "Obvious," she repeated, tasting the strangeness of it after months of being hidden in plain sight. He straightened and turned sharp with purpose. "We need a petition, 2 witnesses, a courier with a strong horse and a clean conscience." The servant who had brought the note still hovered, face pale and fierce. Raphael's gaze found him. "You can ride?" "Yes, senor." Then you will ride to the cathedral district and deliver a request for dispensation to the vicariate. You will hand it to no one who smiles too quickly. You will ask for Father Tomas by name if they try to delay you. The boy's chin rose. I know which men smile too quickly. Good. Go to the antechamber by the study. I will bring the paper and 2 men to put their names to what they saw. Wait for me there. The servant flew, relief turning his feet into birds. Elisa stood very still, the colonnade a cool tunnel that opened onto the night and the scent of orange blossoms. 2 witnesses, she said. Who? Men whose words count even when they are tired, Raphael said dryly. They exist. I will find them. You make it sound easy. It is not, he said, and his smile was brief and rueful. It is only simple. The city tries to confuse us because confusion keeps it fed. He fell silent a moment, letting the night steady them. She heard the distant guitars falter and then recover. Someone laughed too loudly near the fountain, the forced note of a person who wants to step over tension as if over a puddle. The laughter died quickly. The air took its place again. I will draft the petition in the library, Raphael said. You will not be alone. I will sit with my back to the door while you copy the necessary lines. He looked at her hands. Can you hold a pen? She wanted to laugh at that and found that she could. I can. Then we borrow the house's ink for our purpose. They moved together through the hall that ran along the garden. A woman passing the other way turned her face slightly and lifted her fan to screen a smile. Raphael met her eyes, and with one look set her back on her heels without a word. It was not cruelty. It was instruction. In the library, candles had been trimmed since she left. The air held the warm, clean scent of beeswax and paper. The sheets were where she had left them, the quill sleeping where her fingers had released it. She sat and took up a fresh page. Raphael stood at her shoulder with deliberate, unhurried clarity. Write this, he said, to the Vicar General of the Cathedral Church of Seville. We, the undersigned, testify to calumny presently circulating against Doña Elisa Moreno, ward and guest in the house of Alboran, which threatens imminent damage to her good name and the good order of society, if not countered by the lawful means allowed under canon. His voice was a steady rope thrown across deep water. She walked hand over hand along it. The words built a bridge she did not know had been available. Law, mercy, procedure. She had assumed such things belonged to other people. Tonight, they made room for her. They paused when they needed to. He did not rush her. He took the quill once to add a line in his own hand that placed the responsibility squarely on those who had chosen to defame. He did not ask her to soften anything. When they finished, the petition lay with its careful loops and firm strokes on the table, a small boat made of paper aimed at a sturdier shore. Now, the witnesses, he said. The library door opened without a knock, but slowly, the space entered by a man who knew doors as expressions of power. Alejandro crossed the threshold with the half-step of someone who had almost turned away, and did not. His gaze took in the ink, the fresh sheet, the fact of Raphael bent toward her in the circle of candlelight. Something in his chest tightened quietly, like a belt pulled one hole smaller. Señor Marquis, Raphael said, using the title as an acknowledgement and a caution. We are drafting a petition to the cathedral. The city's appetite must be checked. Alejandro's eyes moved to Elisa's face. He found no plea there. He found steadiness, and that steadiness cut him. You need permission to marry without banns, he said, making the sentence dispassionate, because that was how one neutralized a threat. We need protection from a rumor that your roof did not keep out, Raphael answered. Permission is the church's tool. We will use it as it was intended. Alejandro felt heat rise under his collar. Pride told him to say the house would manage this. Prudence told him the house had already made a spectacle and that only something larger than the house could place the fire beyond reach. He inclined his head once. You will do it cleanly, he said. There will be no running through alleys as if the truth belonged there. Raphael's mouth edged toward a smile that was not friendly, not hostile. "I have always preferred the front door," he said. "It opens onto daylight. Who will witness?" "You will," Raphael said without blinking. "And one of your mother's oldest allies who still believes his name must stand behind what he speaks." It was audacious. It was also the quickest way to close the city's mouth. Alejandro recognized both. He weighed the taste of his pride against the necessity of water in a drought. "I will sign as witness," he said. "Not as advocate." "Noted," Raphael said. "I did not ask you to advocate. I ask you to affirm that we act within law." Alejandro stepped closer to the table. The curve of the letters she had formed had a particular clarity. He had seen her hand once before on paper in a ledger. But this was different. This was not the neatness of someone forced to make herself small. This was the precision of a person making a claim. He lowered his head and read. He did not change a word. He signed. The pen moved steadily, a name practiced and weighty. The paper seemed to settle under it, as if the weight now had balance. "I will go speak to the ally you mentioned," he said to Raphael. "He will resist until someone reminds him that tonight's spectacle diminishes the city." "He will hear it from you," Raphael replied. Alejandro left. The door shut with a softness that told the room more than a slam would have. A minute later, two gentlemen of age and reputation were led in by a maid, who looked as if she had done something dangerous and liked the feeling. Raphael explained quickly, without drama. They read the petition, and the lines around their mouths turned grave. They signed. "God keep you," one said to Elisa, not as a piety but as a wish for an actual event. He placed his hand on his heart in the old way and left with a stiffness that came from the knowledge he would be required to retell this night in other houses with exact accuracy. Raphael folded the petition into a neat packet and sealed it with wax from the candle. He pressed his signet into the drop. The imprint cooled. He handed the bundle to the servant, who had returned, jittering with readiness. "You will ride by the broad streets," Raphael said. "You will not be lured into shortcuts. If a gate is closed, you will wait until it opens. If anyone tries to stop you, you will shout, 'For the vicar,' as if your life depended on it. It does not. It only feels like it tonight." The boy nodded and held the packet as if it were an infant. "Yes, senor." "Go." The servant dashed out, his heels wrapping a bright thread down the corridor. The house held its breath. Elisa only now realized she had been braced against a storm for hours. With the packet gone, the storm moved outward into the city, where it belonged. "Sit," Raphael said quietly. "Drink this." He poured watered wine from a decanter he had commandeered from the sideboard, a thing men did without permission when they were born to be forgiven for it. He put the cup in her hand. She drank. The cool slid over a throat, scraped raw by restraint. "Thank you," she said. "I do not ask for thanks," he said. "I ask you to forgive the speed. It is brutal. The church does not like to be hurried, but it will not be insulted by our reason. It knows the difference. You speak as if you know it well." "I know men," he said. "They are everywhere." A silence arrived that did not pinch. It allowed breathing. She looked down at her hands and saw that the small cut had stopped bleeding. The linen he had wrapped earlier still held a trace of warmth from the moment when another man's hand had held hers. She did not tear it off. She did not press it closer. She let it be what it was, evidence of care that had been offered without an admission of feeling. Footsteps returned with a speed that made the candle flames quiver. The servant came in, cheeks flushed, hair damp with effort. He had left and returned in less time than it takes to change a mind. "They will receive us," he said, almost bursting with importance. A clerk took the petition to the vicar's chamber. Father Thomas is in attendance. "They said if we come before sunrise, the question can be heard and answered. They sent a word for you. Grave cause warranted. Witnesses ready." Raphael's shoulders loosed a tension that had piled there like stones. They will see us because the cause is grave, he said to Elisa. We must go before the light grows. Will you come? Yes, she said. And she stood with a steadiness that surprised even her. The house felt them move. It felt the end of something and the start of something else, and wanted to stop both. The dowager appeared as if she had been conjured by a bell. She stood at the mouth of the hall like a gate one must pay to cross. You will not make the city's gossip your prayer, she said, her voice never rising. You will not drag our house to a threshold where you have no right to be. The threshold is the law, Raphael said. And the law welcomes all who ask it for protection when others have stripped it away. She looked at him, as one looks at a man who is inconveniently right. Her gaze flicked to Elisa's face. There was no supplication there, which made what came next both easier and harder. The dowager's fan moved once as if it were a weapon disguised as an accessory. If this must occur, she said, it will occur with dignity. The carriage will be prepared. She did not look at her son. She did not need to. He already stood behind her, having found and broken the necessary resistance, and returned with an ally by means of sentence and stare. He had not meant to become a tool in Raphael's plan. He had become one anyway, because it protected something he refused to name. The carriage rolled to the front with a creak that sounded like a house groaning under load. Dawn had not arrived. The sky had only loosened from black to a deeper blue. The city at night was a different creature, less elegant, more honest. They stepped into the carriage. The driver did not ask where. There is only one place people go when their faces look like that. Alejandro did not get in. He did something worse. He watched them step into a space he had not provided and go without his command. Pride bucked. Conscience held the reins, barely. Will you follow? The dowager asked in a voice that anticipated obedience. He did not answer her. He stepped back into the house where he could pace in the familiar corridors and feel the brand of the sentence he had given and the weight of a choice spiraling away from him like a ribbon in wind. He told himself he would come later. He did not believe it. He watched himself not move and hated the man who did not move. The road to the cathedral was a long breath taken in the dark. Streets that teemed by day lay empty, but for a washerwoman crossing with a basket, and a pair of lovers who ducked into a doorway at the sight of a carriage not their own. The driver kept a respectful pace over stone so the wheels would not draw ears to windows. When they reached the square, the facade rose like a wall between worlds. The great doors were closed, but a small side door near the Patio de los Naranjos stood open, a rectangle of yellow undercut with incense. Father Tomas waited there with a clerk holding a lantern. He was not young. He was not old. His face bore the marks of long interviews with sorrow. He did not waste time on courtesies that would make a defiled night more elegant. He nodded to Raphael. He bowed slightly to Elisa as one bows to a truth that has not yet spoken. You come with witnesses and cause, he said. We do, Raphael answered, and he held out the petition. The priest read in the doorway with the clerk's light steady over the page. His eyes moved without haste and without indulgence. He returned the paper to Raphael. The church will not be used in a game, he said, and no one flinched, because the reprimand had been earned by other people on other nights. The terms of dispensation are strict. They are meant to protect, not to decorate a story. I will ask these questions once. Ask them, Raphael said. He asked them. He asked her whether she stood here by coercion. She said no. He asked whether she sought this act to avoid a future of dependency in a house that did not want her. She said she sought it to defend her name now that others had laid hands on it. He asked whether she understood that some doors would close behind this choice. She said she did, and that the doors already closing would not open for her simply because she waited. He took in her answers, and their weight. He looked at Raphael. And you, he said, you come not to seize what gossip made valuable, but to hold up what gossip would destroy? I come to stand where the wind is strongest, Raphael said. I come because the men who caused this are too fond of comfort to come themselves. The priest's mouth moved in something like a smile that had not grown up yet. He turned, and they went inside. The cathedral's cool found the heat in their faces and drew it away. The nave was a forest of stone and shadow. Candles near a side altar made a small island of gold in a sea of dusk. The register was brought, its page blank and frowning. 2 witnesses, one the ally pried loose by the Marquis's difficult argument, one the older gentleman from the library, stood where the clerk guided them. The dispenser's authority was present, in words and signatures and the humility of time. They would act now, or not at all. Before we begin, Father Thomas said, looking at Elisa, do you wish to pray? I have been praying all night, she answered. I will not stop now. A sound at the porch told the story of the city beginning to wake. Vendors would soon be assembling elsewhere. Here, there was only this moment. Raphael placed his hand on the rail, as if steadying a ship that had not yet left harbor. The priest's voice softened to the cadence that moves men without frightening them. The clerk poised his pen. The inner door opened a fraction. A figure stepped in, pauses stitched into his stride. Alejandro moved into the nave like a man arriving late to his own trial. He had not intended to come. He had intended to be the kind of man who stayed away and bore it. He had failed. He had put on his coat and walked with his refusal like a chain until the chain dragged him here. He saw her where she stood with Raphael, not at the rail yet, but near enough that the difference was a breath. He saw the witnesses. He saw the paper. He saw that there were no pearls and no arrangement of flowers, only the truth laid out with a clerk and a priest to record it. He felt the stone underfoot through the leather of his boots. He felt something tear, a fine cloth inside him giving way where it had been stretched too long. Sound bled at the edges. The great space tilted. He took one step and another that was not quite a step. Raphael saw him. Compassion and anger struck his face at once and cancelled each other. The priest saw him and did not flinch. The witnesses saw him and stiffened because their names were ink and his name was a wall. Elisa turned, not slowly, not quickly, just enough to take in the man who had said a sentence that split her open and now walked toward the place where she would bind herself to not be broken any longer. He tried to draw breath. It came in a shard. The organist, not seeing, not knowing, set his hands to the keys in a soft prelude that lifted the air into music. The note struck and hung, and in that note he reached his limit. His knees went first, cleanly, as if cut. Then the rest of him followed, and the Marquis de Alboran fell to the cold stones of the nave in front of them all. Stone met skin. Cold rushed up his spine, took his breath, and emptied the cathedral into a white ring. Alejandro heard sound as if from underwater. The scrape of a bench, a woman's gasp, a child hushed too late. The organ's single note dissolved like salt. Hands reached him. Not many. Just enough. The rough wool of a verger's sleeve brushed his cheek. A cool cloth found his forehead and stung with clarity. "Lift him," said a voice that had learned to obey itself. Father Thomas. Not far. There. He knew the side chapel by touch before he saw it. The air changed. The nave's vast echo fell away, and the world narrowed to candles, stone, and the hush that belongs to confessions. He was set upon a carved bench. His pulse hammered in his throat, then settled into a hard, steady march. The cloth returned to his face. Someone unfurled the collar of his coat. Fresh air cut his skin like a clean blade. "Water," the priest said, not unkindly. "Sip. Do not drown in pride." He took the cup because he could not refuse an order that wore mercy so plainly. The water tasted like iron and prayer. He drank, and the line between sight and blur straightened. The priest's face came into focus, lined, alert, free of luxury. "You will tell me whether you mean to proceed," Father Thomas said. "I will not preside over vows taken in a storm. If you intend to interrupt, Do it with a conscience ready to finish what it begins. I cannot interrupt, Alejandro said. His voice surprised him, raw, unarmored. I can only ask for delay, a pause to set the floor level under our feet. The priest's eyes were old enough to recognize a man discovering what humility felt like. He made a small motion to the clerk. The register was closed with quiet ceremony. The law allows me to suspend until I am satisfied of free consent, he said. I am not satisfied. I will call a pause. Footsteps approached the chapel door with the clipped authority of someone who never waited for permission to enter any room in her life. The dowager moved into the light, 2 matrons in her wake. The candle flames jumped at the draft of her will. You will not make a theater of this, she said, each word shaped as if it were a coin struck with a die. If the matter is to be done, we will do it, and be done. Alejandro lifted his head. Mother. He saw her scan the little space, taking inventory. The priest, the bench, the son sitting where penitents sat, the damp cloth, and beyond, through the arch, the figures at the rail. Raphael, upright and patient. Elisa in the shadow near the sanctuary, hands folded over a fan. The sight burned through him. He had come because he could not stay away. He had fallen because the sight of another man standing where he had refused to stand broke something he had been holding together since youth with the wrong materials. You will stand, the dowager said, the mother replacing the marchioness for a breath. They are looking. They are always looking, he answered. It is time they saw something that matters. Father Tomas turned toward the nave and spoke in a voice made to carry without shouting. By my authority, the ceremony is paused. No sacrament will be given while there is doubt. The hum of the nave altered. It did not swell into scandal. It quieted into a strange, waiting respect. Even the curious know when they are watching a hinge turn. Alejandro pushed himself to his feet. The stone admitted his weight without complaint. The cloth fell from his forehead. He steadied himself with a hand to the bench and then let go. His body obeyed. He walked out of the chapel and took 3 steps into the nave until he stood where the invisible line between sacred and profane lies, and looked at the people who had come out of bed too early to consider other people's ruin. I will speak, he said, and I will be brief. His voice carried. Old training served him in this at least. He had learned in childhood how to command the air of a room. He had used it to maintain order. He would use it now to break it. Our house, he began, and the word our was the first uncalculated admission he had allowed out of his mouth in months, is not free of stain. Properties acquired in recent years under cover of legal change bear marks that trouble me. I have known of irregularities. I have not had the courage to put my name to their examination. That ends today. A thin sigh moved across the pews, not shock, but recognition. The city was not innocent. It had watched transfers happen at the speed of a signature and had taught itself not to ask too many questions. It had also watched men whisper their sleeplessness into their pillows. He continued, I will willingly renounce any holding under suspicion until it is proven clean. I will invite scrutiny, civil and ecclesiastical. I place my name to restitution where restitution is owed. I say this here because the harm our house has caused is not only to ledgers and maps. It is the harm of silence. It is the harm of treating a person as a debt to be settled with arrangement and decree. He held the silence because he had learned at 12 that silence was a tool. Used well, it turns words into deeds. In the aisle, the dowager held herself as if rigid carriage were a virtue that might breed into the blood if one held it long enough. Her fan did not move. The matrons beside her shifted, caught between habit and a small, cold respect for a son who undid his house in public to rebuild it with different wood. Father Tomas listened without changing his hands upon the book. Raphael did not smile. He looked down the nave toward Elisa, then back to the man who had drawn a line between duty and heart, and picked the wrong side until it saved him less than he had hoped. Alejandro looked at Elisa now, and he did not look away. "I spoke a sentence no one should hear in the place where you heard it," he said, his voice nearly breaking on the remembrance. "I spoke it to protect something I mistook for honor. I ask, not forgiveness, that is a gift, but the chance to act rightly in the same public where I failed." The water in the font near the aisle caught a tremble and steadied again. No one moved to leave. They held there, the whole room tilted toward a point, not on any map. "Father," Alejandro said, turning toward the priest, "you must pause. It would be a sin to let any vow be spoken while there is doubt of freedom. It is mine. It is hers. It is everyone's." "It is paused," Father Tomas said. "And now we will move with hands clean." From the back pews came the quiet scrape of a man rising, the same older gentleman who had signed the petition an hour ago. He stood as if to say without presumption that the city heard and would remember. That was all. He sat again, the message sent without words. Alejandro breathed. Breath was a kind of mercy he had not expected to taste again this morning. He felt the floor level beneath his feet. He looked once more at his mother. She looked away from his eyes and fastened her gaze upon Elisa's face, as if to learn something other than what she expected. That, too, felt like a beginning. He turned, bowed slightly to the priest as a man bows when asking for help, and stepped back from the sanctuary. He had come forward to say what must be said. He would not take more space than the truth needed. Elisa watched him from the shadow between pillars, her hands crossed at her waist over the fan. The wood was warm now from her skin. The click of its hidden catch had fixed itself in her mind, as the beat of a small, defiant heart. She had seen men confess without cost. She had seen men arrange words like flowers to hide rot. This did not smell of flowers. It smelled of stone and water and a door unbarred. Raphael reached her side but did not speak. He would not pull her forward. He would not push her back. He would be the measured pace at which she walked. She stepped from the shadow into the nave. The light from the high windows found her hair and set a thin rim on it, as if to be kind at last. She did not curtsy. Courtesy is for games. She inclined her head to the priest, and then to the man who had just taken apart the scaffolding that had held him upright for years. "Father," she said, her voice clear enough to carry without effort, "I will not be used to wash a name. I will not be sent to a priest like a letter with a seal and nothing inside. If dispensations are given, they will be given clean. If vows are spoken, they will be spoken free. They will," Father Tomas said. He had wanted exactly this from her. Not drama. Clarity. Raphael took a breath and spoke for himself now, not for the machinery they had set into motion. "I asked for a dispensation because a rumor made sharp tools of careless mouths," he said, keeping his gaze where it belonged, on the priest while the truth was weighed, and on Elisa when choice was laid at her feet. "I asked because I will not see her chased into a corner by cruelty that calls itself custom. If there is any coercion here, it is mine in asking for speed. If that is too much, I will be silent and take the punishment of time." Alejandro heard the last phrase like a man hears a fair opponent acknowledge the rules. Punishment of time. It was a line he admired because it called its cost by its right name. Elisa looked from one man to the other and found that both had become real in different ways. It did not simplify anything. It made it possible. "I will not marry under a lie," she said. "Not a tender lie, not a hard one." "Then we will drive out the lies," Raphael said. She breathed once, and the breath took the last of a tremor with it. "There is proof," she said. "There is more than rumor that made this night. There is a truth about the holdings named by the Marquis that belongs to no one's whisper. I hold it. I have held it in a place no one thought to look." Father Tomas did not blink. "Bring it into the light," he said. "Not in the nave. In the sacristy. The church examines with care." The dowager's fan moved again in a small, involuntary start at the word proof, as if proof were a vulgarity. She closed it and held it as if it could hide a change of weather. She did not object. A mariner knows when to keep his ship steady and let the wind argue elsewhere. Alejandro's heart pushed against his ribs hard enough to leave a bruise on his will. If proof existed, if a seal or a letter or an unhappy tale sat within reach and would emerge, the house would bleed where it had looked strongest. He had already offered the cut. He would make it clean. "Father," he said, "if what she brings proves what I have feared, I will give my name to the act required. Here, now." "You cannot make your repentance more dramatic than the sin," the priest said without unkindness. "You can make it exact. That is enough." The clerk gathered his papers. A sacristan moved from shadow to door to prepare the inner room. The witnesses stood. The movement had no panic in it. It was the brisk readiness of a place trained for centuries to pick up grief and lay it upon a table without breaking it or pretending it was pleasant. The little procession formed without ceremony, just purpose. The priest led. The clerk followed with the ledger. Raphael kept beside Elisa because he had promised to stand where the wind was strongest. Alejandro walked a pace behind, neither master nor guest, simply a man falsifying nothing in his walk. The side door opened into the sacristy. The air changed again, closer, scented with wax and linen and old wood. Oaken presses lined the walls, vestments hung with quiet dignity, and a long table stood cleared, save for a brass seal and the shadow of a lamp. Elisa moved to the table with the conscious care of a person carrying something fragile and heavy. She laid the fan down upon the linen, the carved orange blossoms catching a bar of pale light from the high window. Her hand found the hidden catch by touch she could make in her sleep. The little click was clear in the quiet. It dated back to a winter evening by a small fire when her father had shown her where safety could hide after the world took all safer places. The priest set his hands on the table's edge, as if to anchor the room.
"We will proceed," he said, and he did not look at the dowager, who had taken up a position near the door as if it were a battlefield standard. He did not look at the onlookers half gathered beyond the threshold. He looked only at the faces at the table and the object between their hands. Alejandro watched the fan as if it were a delicate clock about to open and tell time in a language he had refused to learn. He kept himself from reaching by holding his breath.
He let it go and took another without drowning. It was a discipline he had not learned at school and wished he had. Raphael stood with his fingers lightly touching the table's edge. He did not look at the fan. He kept his eyes on Elisa's face to read what price this act asked of her and to recognize it when it was paid. Elisa lifted the guard of the fan. The hinge moved smoothly, like a sentence finally spoken in the right room. She paused to be sure her hands would not betray her. They did not. She looked up once at the priest, then at Alejandro, and read on both faces the same thing, expressed in different alphabets: resolve. "Here," Father Tomas said, in a tone that made the table a place of work and not spectacle. "We will see what truth asks us to do." Together, Raphael beside her, Alejandro a pace behind, they crossed the cool threshold into the sacristy, where truth waited beneath ivory and sandalwood. Elisa's hands were steady because they had to be. The sacristy held the hush of an old workshop: wax, wood, linen, a light cut high along the wall. She set the fan upon the linen-covered table and felt the line of the hidden catch under her thumb. A small sound, clean as a pin falling. The guard lifted. Inside, the folded letter lay where she had hidden it months ago, and beside it, the miniature plate, cold and precise. She breathed once and unfolded the paper. Her father's hand rose from the page, cramped from fear but exact, the way a good engraver keeps his lines even when the floor tilts. She did not rush. She held the letter so the priest and clerk could see. "He was ordered," she said quietly. "He wrote everything. The date. The man who brought the payment." The mark he cut to prove to himself the seal could be found again. Father Tomas inclined his head. "Read the mark." She traced the line on the plate with a fingertip. There, at the inner curve, a notch that would not have been made by accident. "Here," she said. She did not look at the door where the dowager stood like a figurehead. She did not look at the man just inside the threshold who had moved through rooms all his life without ever finding this one. The clerk warmed a small spoonful of wax. He held it over a shallow dish until it pooled in a neat circle. He passed the plate to the priest, who pressed it down with care and lifted it again. The impression cooled, the edges sharp as judgment. The floor showed itself like a thread pulled wrong. The clerk went to a wooden press against the wall and drew out a book, thick with folded papers and red strings. He turned pages to a bundle marked in his own script. He laid an impression beside the new one. The likeness was indecent. "It is the same," the clerk said, throat tight with the kind of anger a clerk is allowed. "Even the mistake repeats the way a man repeats a habit." Elisa kept her eyes on the work. It calmed her. Work makes a person sane after a night of being watched. The letters on the page, the names, the properties, were not her craft, but they were a craft. Someone had cut truth into wax with his hand. Someone had cut lies with the same tool. The difference lay in what the hand had meant. From the door came an intake of breath, quick, then smothered. Don Inigo had not spoken since he entered. Now his pride tried to make a sound that would cover him and failed. The dowager held her fan like a plank over a breach. "You will not accuse men without the instruments of law," she said, but the sentence was already behind events. "We accuse no one," Father Tomas answered. "We examine what is before us. The instruments are here. So is the light." Elisa placed her father's letter on the table beside the impression. The handwriting spoke clearly. The priest read it, as a man reads a testament he must execute whether he wishes to or not. The date matched the moment when the city's ownerships had shifted faster than carts could carry ledgers across town. The note about the floor was precise. The description of the intermediary was careful and unflattering without malice. Alejandro stood a pace back, as if distance could make reality less hot. It could not. The shape of the plate might as well have been pressed into his palm. The first time he had suspected, he had moved his suspicion aside like a chair so he could pass. Now there was no passage except through. He listened to the clerk describe the bundle of deeds whose seals matched in detail. He listened to the priest read the names of the former holders that the plate had opened. Guildsmen, a convent, people no one had thought to ask. He looked at Elisa's face when the names were spoken, and saw there the quiet grief of a woman who could have asked and was not asked. "Enough," he said, not to stop the truth but to join it. "We have what we need." Elisa turned her head toward him. For the first time that morning, he did not look away. "Father," he said, and all the old lessons about speaking where law sat inside a room came back to steady his voice. "You will have a declaration. It will be with my name upon it. I renounce any claim secured by that plate or its copies. I request whatever inquiry your office requires, and I will go from here to the civil authority to parallel it. I ask the clerk to witness my signature now, and yours to seal it where this church seals such things." The clerk blinked fast, then reached for a blank sheet. He was no actor, but this morning he was asked to keep pace with men who had found their parts. He set down the date, the place, the names. He left a wide river of white for the declaration itself. "Speak it," Father Tomas said. "He will write what you say." Alejandro did not use flourish. He spoke the facts in the order a judge would want them, and added the sentence that had no place in law books and every place in conscience. "Our honor does not require property," he said. "It requires the truth we were afraid to read." Don Inigo made a small movement, a man preparing to defend with the tricks that had served him when rooms were dark and men were forgiving. The priest's gaze moved to him once. He recovered, as men do who train themselves in salons. "We are grateful to the Marquis for his scruples," he murmured. "We must not be hasty. The city will not forgive a house for tearing itself in two when a stitch would do. Alejandro turned his head. It will forgive us less, he said, for sewing over a wound and calling it healed. The dowager's mouth set at the corner, an old scar waking. She did not defend her brother. She did not defend her house. She looked at the paper and listened to the scratch of the clerk's pen and understood that the wind had shifted in a way nobles cannot stop with wit or lace. She made a small motion with her chin, as if to say to the priest, "Proceed." The clerk read back the declaration. It did not sing. It did not need to. It bound. Alejandro took the pen. The nib bit the paper, then steadied. He signed his name in the hand that had signed invitations and remittances and decrees for a decade. This one moved differently. When he finished, he let out a breath, like a man pulling up a net and finding a body and bringing it ashore because that, too, was his to do. The priest asked for the seal. The clerk brought the parish seal in brass. Wax warmed. The impression took. It cooled into authority. The priest lifted the page, weighed it in his hand, and set it down with a small nod to the weight that matters. "We will send copies," he said, "to those who keep order with us in the city." Elisa's heart loosened, not with joy yet, but with relief that felt like cool water after heat. She touched the fan's edge, no longer as armor, but as a promise kept to a man already in the ground. Her father had hidden his dignity in a thing men did not examine. She had kept it until morning. "Now," Father Tomas said, his tone changing to the cadence of clean procedure, "we will return to the nave. No vows have been spoken. There is no marriage. There is no wrong to be unnamed." He looked at Raphael. The Count bowed his head in that gracious way of men who carry their exits with elegance. "We will tell the register what it needs to hear," Raphael said, "that we came with cause, and the cause was answered with truth." He turned to Elisa. "You are free," he said simply. "Not because I give it, because it is yours." Her throat tightened. "You have been brave for me. I have been practical with my soul," he said, and his smile was the kind that makes men friends for life. "Do not thank me. Use it." Alejandro heard the exchange, as a man hears a distant bell tolling a name that is not his. He understood its generosity. It raised a debt that could not be paid with coin. He did not speak into it. He would not spoil a moment that was neither his to take nor to diminish. They moved together back through the narrow door. The nave received them, stone cool against the mounting heat of the day. People had come closer but not too close, held by a line between curiosity and respect. The register stood upon the table with its page open and blank. The clerk placed his hand upon it, as if to keep it from being tempted. Raphael stepped forward with Father Tomas. The priest lifted his voice. "Those who came to witness a marriage will witness instead the right order of law," he said. "No vows have been spoken, no bond has been made. The church has paused, not refused. The pause was needed. It has served its purpose." He did not explain further. He did not need to. Raphael turned to Elisa in front of the small country of eyes. "I ask to stand where cruelty was strongest," he said, pitching his words for her and for the room. "That work is done for now. I do not take what was never mine." He bowed to her, not formally, not as to a monarch, but as to a person who has made him better. He bowed to the priest. He bowed a fraction in the direction of the Marquis. The fraction mattered. It acknowledged a man's choice without making him a saint. Then he stepped back to let the space write its own sentences. The moment stretched. Alejandro did not fill it with fine language he could easily summon. He crossed the distance, as a man crosses a road he might be struck in. He stopped at a respectful space. "Elisa," he said, and for the first time he said her name as if it were his to guard, not to manage. "I cannot ask anything you do not wish to give. I will not make another sentence that steals your air. The only thing I have to place before you is what I withheld." He stood in his own ruin and did not pretend it was a palace. "My heart," he said, "without the house. Without the coat. Without the protection of being admired for something that is not me." The knave did not move. A bell outside somewhere dared to speak and fell silent again, respectful of what was happening where it could not go. Elisa's hands trembled once. She let them tremble and did not hide them with her fan. "I did not dream of a title," she said, soft but unwavering. "I dreamed of someone who would speak the truth, even when it cost him everything he thought he was." "It has cost me less than the sentence I spoke to you," he answered. "I could live with stain on my accounts. I cannot live with stain on what I feel." She looked at him long enough to be sure she would remember this, even if she turned away. The pain, the pride, the hard beauty of a man newly honest. Then she took one step closer, felt the air change between them, felt the city hold its breath, and let her own breath carry her forward. "I will not marry today," she said, "not in a hurry. Not to repair a story, but I will walk with you out of this church into the day, and I will let the day see that I have chosen." He nodded once, the relief not dramatic, deep. "We will do everything in the light," he said. "The banns, the repairs, the apologies, the hours no one praises." "I have more courage for the hours no one praises," she said. "That is where I was made." His mouth almost softened into a smile, and then did. It was small. It was true. The priest, human enough to be moved and old enough to know what to do with it, spoke with quiet authority to the clerk. "Record what happened and what did not. The church will post the appropriate notices when they are requested." He lifted a hand as if in blessing, and perhaps it was one, though no words followed. Sometimes a hand raised over two people is a gate opening, not a dismissal. They turned toward the side door together. The crowd parted without murmurs. The dowager watched them go with her fan closed, her face not yet softened, but less certain in its disapproval. She would recalibrate. That was her genius. Today she would begin by learning the shape of a truth that did not bow to her. Out in the patio de los Naranjos, the morning had ripened. The trees wore their blossoms like quiet fireworks. Water made its patient sound at the basins. Light slid over white walls and settled on stone. They stepped into the courtyard as if into a promise without music. The air held the bittersweet of Azahar, sharper now, more real. Alejandro lifted his hand, not to claim, not to possess, but to offer a path in a city where paths are sometimes cruel. She placed her hand in his. It fit there, because two hands that intend the same road will sooner or later find each other's weight. Raphael stood a little way off, a line of shade across his boot. He caught her eye and nodded once, anchoring the morning with grace. Then he turned away, his work done, his heart lighter than a man might expect after he has let go of something he would have been proud to carry. Alejandro did not speak until they had crossed half the courtyard. When he did, he aimed his words at the future because the present was already full. "We will return what must be returned," he said. "We will put our household before those we harmed and ask their patience. I will walk where I have not walked, with shame I have not borne. If you will bear it with me, I will spend the rest of my days earning the peace of your name." "Do not earn me," she said. "Walk with me." He breathed, and it felt like beginning. "Yes." They paused under a tree where the sunlight lay in little coins along the stones. The fan in her hand was no longer a secret chest, but an ornament, a memory. She opened it and let it stir the air between them. A small breeze in a small country made suddenly vast. The carved blossoms caught the light and threw it back as if to say the past had done its work and would not be needed for hiding anymore. He lifted her hand to his lips. No one applauded. No one needed to. The simple grace of it made the courtyard belong to them for a moment. He did not hurry. He did not make a show of reverence. He simply laid his mouth against the knuckles that had held a letter and a life and a choice, and closed his eyes. because sometimes a man must close them to see clearly. When he lowered her hand, she did not let go. "Alejandro," she said for the first time, the name new in her mouth and right. "Let us go home by the long way." "By the long way," he agreed, "so all who need to see will see." They walked. The day opened like a door that had been stuck for years and had finally been persuaded by patience instead of force. The city would talk, all cities do. It would say they had made a scene. It would say they had been foolish or brave or both. It would say many things. It would also, quietly, exchange a bad habit for a better one. At the gate, he paused. "There is one thing left that I must say aloud," he told her. "Not for the city, for us." She waited, and the waiting was not a test. It was an invitation. "I love you," he said, the words unadorned, fully paid for, finally free. Not as a rescue, not as a debt, not as a duty, as a fact that will not be argued with. She closed the fan. The click sounded like a small lock opened forever. "Then we will not argue with it," she answered. "We will live in it." He felt the sentence settle into his bones the way a house settles at dusk, an old structure adjusting to weight it was made to hold. He bent his head and kissed her forehead, a seal that needed no wax. She leaned into it, and the morning pressed its fragrance around them like a quiet vow. They stepped into the street, still hand in hand. The city went about its business, and the business of two hearts joined its murmuring. Behind them, the cathedral kept its cool, and within it the clerk dried the ink on a declaration that would alter a ledger and a history. Before them, orange trees lined the path home. The fan rested against her wrist as they walked, no longer a hiding place, only a beautiful thing that had done its duty and now wished them joy. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.